Hello and welcome to the new episode of the Orca interviews. We're here with Róisín Pinfield, who is a marine biologist here in Ireland.
Hi, I'm Róisín Pinfield. I'm a PhD student down here in University College Cork. Um, Began the PhD back in 2016. So, um, so my PhD is basically focused on a group of killer whales that interact with the Irish mackerel fishery. And most of the interactions occur in the North Sea in the wintertime between just the fishing grounds would be kind of around Shetland, so kind of to the maybe the east or west, depending on the fish. So the fish are overwintering, feeding on the Norwegian deeps. From kind of late September, early October, they begin their long migration. And so they leave the Norwegian deeps and then they kind of come on their migration between Shetland and north of Scotland. They head west to the west of the Hebrides, where the shelf edge is, and then they come south towards Ireland and then spawn kind of along our western seaboard, and some of them will come down and they'll continue down as far as the Iberian Peninsula. So basically, when the killer whales are the killer whale interactions usually happen between Shetland and the west of the Hebrides, and so when they're hauling mackerel in that area, you get a lot of killer whales that come up and they're foraging, interacting around the nets as they're hauling. And nobody had done any focused research on this particular killer whale group. And so in 2015, I applied to the Irish Research Council for funding. I had kind of built up a relationship with the fishermen. And so I knew I knew that they'd be willing. So I had asked a few of them. I had some previous observer jobs on fishing boats, so I knew a few of them, and I knew that they'd be on board if I could get some funding. I managed to successfully get the funding with the Marine Institute of Ireland. So they're part funders of the PhD. And the research began in 2016. And so kind of between October and January, I would board the vessels, and they mainly from Killybegs, and they would travel up to that region. And most of the work, so because there was no like baseline data about this particular group of killer whales, we didn't know how many there were, where they were going, what's their diet year round, who they're genetically related to. So the PhD is all about like building up like a baseline knowledge of this particular group of animals. And so yeah, a lot of the work has been done now. So I'm kind of towards the end of the thesis. I'm pulling it together. There was a lot of collaborative work. So one of the things that we would do to build up an abundance estimate would take a lot of photographic images of the dorsal fin saddles. I'm sure many of your followers probably know that we use the saddle patches, dorsal fin, eye patches, build up catalogs, and then I would compare then with. So our original thought was that they were quite likely coming down from Norway. So they had the Norwegian Orca survey up there. It's been led by Dr. Eve Jordan, and then you have Dr. Philippa Samara in Iceland, and you have the Scottish Orca survey. So they all have catalogs. So I've been building up a catalog to compare with them. So I'm kind of still in the throes of that. And recently, there was a killer whale washed up in Sweden. This is probably one of the more exciting things that have happened, because although it was sad, this animal washed up. He was actually found under the jetty, but I actually had a match. I had photographed that animal in 2016 and 2017. And so it was the first time that we were like, okay, maybe the animals are going east as well. So we're trying to, so at the moment I'm kind of building up contacts in Sweden, and there's a researcher in Denmark. She's gonna start up a killer whale project hopefully in August, September this year. And yeah, so it was starting to get insights of where these animals might be going other times of year. So it's kind of come to sight that there's actually killer whales being seen off Sweden in May, June, and July, which I wasn't aware of. So yeah, and then what else have we done? Genetically, so I done an eDNA study as well, part of the PhD. So environmental DNA is where we basically trying to extract DNA from water samples. So I would have taken a lot of seawater samples from the fishing vessels. And I also joined the Icelandic Orca project, and we took seawater samples while the killer whales were around the rib and stuff like that. And unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting DNA from killer whales in the seawater samples, but we were still able to publish it and give some kind of good, well, I hope it's good anyway, recommendations for anyone else who's going to do the work. That you have to be really close to the animals and hope that they poop or something in the water close by your sample. It's eDNA is very novel, and there's a lot of work being done on it to try and hone the skills and to use it as a tool along with everything else, you know, because biopsy samples are very difficult to get. So I did I got managed to get one biopsy. You can imagine on a fishing vessel in the North Sea in winter time, it's very difficult to get kind of conditions that would be good enough to get biopsies. So what I didn't manage it from the fishing vessel, but in 2018, we managed to get ship time on board the Celtic Voyager. So we did a dedicated killer whale trip up to the fishing grounds in the winter time. And
Wow.
yeah, that was really cool. We actually had the Voyager was one of the smallest vessels. So we had a bit of a bumpy trip. But yeah, we got one good day in the fishing ground, and thanks to the fishermen who kind of kept me updated as to where they were fishing. I was able to catch them, because one of the things that I really rely on is the cooperation of the fishermen, and they've been so good. It wouldn't have been possible without them. But even on that trip, you know, because I mean, one of the things that attracts the killer whales is the sound of the net drums. When the net drums kick in, you know, you can see the killer whales come straight away. You know, and we think that's certainly an acoustic cue. They know, hey, that boat's got fish, and so we definitely need them because we weren't hauling ourselves. So knowing where the boats was. So
That's interesting.
so yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, you know, I did some interviews with the fishermen as well, and some of them are fishing 40, 50 years, and you know, they're saying they're seeing these animals every winter, you know, all the time. It's a very positive relationship. They have a lot of respect for them, really like them. So it's I suppose it's kind of like a novel thing that they get to see them. So they were very much on board with the project, and yeah, so genetically, what the research is showing that these particular group of killer whales are part of a larger population that encompasses like the Icelandic and Norwegian killer whales. So genetically, they are, you know, classed as one, even though they're kind of their own populations. But you know, recently there have been some movement shown between Iceland and Norway, and we know that there's definitely a group coming from Iceland to Shetland every year. So you know, that's why the collaborations between countries is so important, because these animals can travel so far. What else have we looked at? Pollutant levels, diet. Yeah, it's a huge project.
I can imagine.
Maybe I can stop talking and you can, I don't know, maybe there's some good questions.
No, it's fascinating because like, you know, that level of science on them, it's important to understand the migratory, you know, directions they're going through and the diet, but also the actual contaminants. Like I know that like long chain molecules are being found in the fat, in their lipids, and has affected their, you know, their reproductive systems in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, PCBs is a big problem. And I suppose because you know, this region, especially the UK, would have been highly industrialized, and you know, with a lot of PCBs being released into the environment, and even though they were banned, and I think the early 80s, you know, they're still kind of being recycled in nature, and you know, it's kind of been shown that you know, that it bioaccumulates up the food chain. So if you have animals that are feeding on fish, or you know, you've got animals that are feeding on marine mammals, they're even more impacted because they're accumulating, and actually it becomes more toxic to an animal if it's bioaccumulated. So it is, depending on what the animals are feeding on, the higher the level of PCB that they will have.
Róisín, has there anything been talked about mercury levels in Orca?
There has. I'm not really up to speed on that, but I know there has been work done, but I'm not sure.
Really, yeah. Because like I was looking into it. I was looking into the PCB element of it, the way that they accumulate up through the food chain, and because Orca live up to 80, possibly 90 years old, that the accumulation levels will continue to rise. And I know that the Orca that visit Ireland and go off into the west, and like you said there in the east, they do eat what is it again, the fish, the mackerel. I'm not sure about the mercury levels in mackerel, but the mercury levels in red tuna, which is the ones going through Iberia, like it was just looking at, was there any studies there done, and how does mercury affect the orca, if any? So it would be interesting to look at that kind of science. But anyway, that's off topic. Sorry.
Oh, you're okay. I think it has been done, and I think it has been done down there by Dr. Ruth Esteban. I think she's published on that. Not 100%, but yeah. PCBs is a big problem, especially with the females will offload PCBs in the calf, and they can offload up to 80-90%. So the first calf in particular is, you know, highly impacted, and it will kill them. And you know, they only reproduce every 4 to 6 years, so the loss of a calf is huge to a population. So a male animal, you know, has no offloading output, you know, whereas the females do with the calves. So it impacts neurologically, reproductively.
Is there any way to make a molecule, a two-chain molecule that bonds to the large chain molecule, and maybe one that has a similar thing to, or a stronger bond like a lipid molecule, and maybe we can actually get them to pass it through their blood somehow? I don't know. It would be an interesting study to see if we can design some kind of molecule to pull it out of, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, PCBs are even impacting humans.
It is,
So it's like, you know, cancers and all sorts.
Problem with science is always funding, isn't it, Róisín?
Yeah, and you know, I suppose if you went down the route of making a molecule, then you don't know what impact that molecule could have on other parts of their system. And
Yeah,
You know, it's
true.
complicated.
Very
Look,
complicated. The
yeah,
lads like what are they, like the lads that make these molecules like beyond the surface of frying pans and so on. I can't remember the top of my head what they're um, called. But anyway, those guys should be made responsible by governments. I think anyway, I believe anyway. So going back to Orca, or even marine life in general. Do you have a basic understanding of what are the large marine animals that visit the Irish coasts?
Yeah, well, I mean, like in terms of whales, like your fin whales, your humpback whales. Actually, the humpback whales are very interesting at the moment because they used to always be, well, mostly have been seen along our south coast, between kind of Waterford and Cork, Kerry. But now they seem to be popping up all along our west coast, and as far as north of Donegal, west Mayo, and like they have IDs on them as well. You know, they use the under part of the fluke. So they know if it's the same animals, but it seems that they have shifted now, that they're now preferring the west coast and south coast, it seems. So maybe their prey has shifted. So you have your fin whales, your humpback whales, minke whales, and then the summertime off the west coast, you might get your Rizzo's dolphins coming in July, August, and then you get white beaks as well. White beak dolphins, common dolphins. Common dolphins are everywhere. They're all around our
Common
shores.
dolphins had it.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
We had a very famous common dolphin in Ireland called fungi.
No, it's a bottlenose dolphin.
Oh, was he a bottlenose? So
yeah. I'm not sure what he hasn't been seen since COVID. Well, fungi. So we had a few of those. I know there's another one of those lone dolphins. Dusky, is it? She's off the west coast.
I went down to Dingle.
She's in Clare. Yeah, it's kind of unusual that you would have an animal by itself, but it seems bottlenose dolphins. There's been a few loners around the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have your bottlenose dolphins, the Shannon Estuary. They are semi-permanent resident. There's only 5 resident bottlenose populations in Europe, and we have one of them in the Shannon Estuary. And they're big and strong, and I would advise anyone to go see them. There's actually a friend of mine has just taken on Cargo Hold Dolphin Watch in Clare. It's been a lot of research done on the bottlenose dolphins in the Shannon, and there will continue to be because they're very important. They're an Annex II species, which means that they're highly protected in our waters, and same with harbour porpoise. We have little small harbour porpoise that's very small. And then you have your seals. What other large mammals have we got?
We have the whale shark, don't we? We've whale sharks.
Basking sharks, yeah, lots of basking sharks. They kind of seem to peak around April time. I think one of them has been tracked recently. Was it down to Africa? Did one go to Africa and one went across the Atlantic? But certainly, it seems like we're an important mating area for them.
Yeah. Yeah, we have
got like the blue sharks seem to be. They were kind of hardly hit. They were heavily hit. Their populations. They were being bycaught a lot. But I'm not sure what the status is on them at the moment.
Talking about bycatch, Róisín, was there any, like you have a good relationship with the fishers in terms of the Orca, but has there been any bycatch in relation to Orca and those kind of things going on?
No. Well, I think I heard, I was told one story of that they did catch a young one once, but they said it smelled so bad that they reckon it might have been dead already.
Right.
It wasn't fresh, but it did. But I mean, it seems like, well, the fishermen certainly don't want to catch them.
Yeah.
But you can see when when the fishing boats are, when they're hauling, they have to stop. You can see the killer whales kind of moving around, and some groups come. You have some animals. It's mainly bulls that are coming in, circling around the net, and because it can take an hour, or more or less, depending on the size of the haul, to pump the fish on board. But often you will see the mothers and calves are that bit further back.
Right.
So I mean, killer whales, like nearly similar to all the other dolphin species, say, the calves, the young ones will stay with them. No,
Yeah.
the calves will stay like right up close, maybe 2 years, and killer whales certainly known that, I think in some parts of the world they've shown that the males will stay with the mothers for life.
Yeah. They only go out to other pods to mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose it's different. It's different depending. I mean, it's harder for us to know what's happening with that sort of stuff here, because a lot of the killer whale research here is kind of still very much evolving. It's still very new here, in comparison to all the years of research, that's been done in Canada. So it's kind of harder to build, we're still building on the knowledge here of what exactly is happening, but killer whales do invest a lot in their young, so maybe the younger ones are teaching. Sometimes you will see a lot of tail slaps from the female. It's possibly communication, with the young one, stay back or stay with me.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is all just what I think is happening, but very, very rare. I don't think I've ever witnessed a very young animal up close to the vessel.
So
And
it's all right, or learning.
when they start, yeah, they're, I suppose, teaching, because these boats are fishing, they open up the net between two vessels, so you have two vessels going along, with a big net between them. But I have seen killer whales come between them, but that it's a midwater trawl, so it's underneath. But I would, most of the time though, I've seen the killer whales is when they've stopped and they're hauling in. So one boat will haul in the net. So yeah, I think from what I hear and from what I've seen, no, they're not catching them, which is great.
It's great,
and like
yeah.
every single encounter I had, I think I had 40. I can't remember the exact figure, but I had over 40 encounters, and pretty much all of them had calves and juveniles.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and like the mother and calves will come when the boats are finished hauling and they start to move away. You will see that the smaller, they'll all come, and they'll come, swim alongside the vessel for a while. But that's around the only time you will see the small ones in close. You'll never see them in close in net. So
that's excellent.
I'm sure there's some sort of learning. Like killer whales are known to be prey specialists. They have certain techniques, ways of catching things and doing things. They're very specialized in how they forage and hunt, and I'm sure they've honed their skills for this as well. So hopefully there will be it'll continue, and there'll be no animals caught.
It's funny that you mentioned that, actually, Róisín, because I was going to ask you, so what's next? Like what ideally do we need to, you're cataloging orca at the moment and finding out their predatory routes. But in terms of the orca going across Ireland and traveling westward, what do we need to do next in terms of research? Like, can you think of a few things that Ireland is desperately kind of like falling behind on, or what do we need to look at in terms of research going forward? Like,
in terms of killer whale research.
Yeah, in terms of killer whale research outside your own kind of like studies right now, what would be the next step, or should we do?
I suppose the most important thing is that research, like, it's kind of that the studies kind of continue on, that, you know, like, hopefully in another few years that, I don't know if it'll be me or somebody else might be able to board those fishing vessels and get out and get more images, because I have an abundance estimate, but it's very preliminary. There's still new animals being added. So in order to, I mean, it's so important for conservation that, like, studies are continued, that, you know, even people as citizen scientists, if they see something on the coast, that they record it and they send it to Irish Whale and Dolphin Group or the National Biodiversity Data Centre. They all have apps, and that if you see something, that you record it, even if you're not sure what it is. Like, if you could take a video of it, or just or, you know. So in terms of research, I think is that we have more longitudinal studies, that we continue on, not only like trying new different types of avenues, like the likes of environmental DNA, but that the baseline research of, you know, cataloging and
that's like your research is so important that way.
And that we can see, oh, you know, are these animals still being seen, or looks like their numbers are dropping off, or, you know, is there, you know, that we continue to maybe get DNA samples that we can have a look, hey, in 10 years down the line, we take a skin sample, does it look like the PCB levels? Are they starting to, you know, come down, or are they still the same? Yeah, I think, like, just continuing to put funding into research, because that's what happens. A lot of research, it drops off because there isn't funding there to continue it. I suppose, like, we're just like everybody else. We have to live, live and pay bills and everything else that goes on in the background, you know. So it's harder to stay in the field if you don't have continuous funding. And there's lots of really cool novel research out there. There's a lot of work being done with drones, with environmental DNA, like,
I think
genetics. Like, there's so many different things evolving all the time, new techniques and being built up. And it's time on the water, like getting boats and getting ship time, and it just everything, equipment, the whole lot. It all takes a lot of money. So funding is our biggest.
In an ideal situation, we'd have like a research vessel dedicated to large marine life, that you can actually have time, like a time bank on it or something. And
I mean, like, there's a lot of surveys done every year with the new Irish Marine Institute vessel.
You're talking about techniques of getting DNA. There was a video recently I seen where people from either, I think it was the shore or on the deck of a boat, and they were using these modified crossbows, and bolts on the crossbow was adapted to only take, you know, the very initial skin sample off the orca. It was attached to a rope. Like, something like that would probably be very useful in your line of
so, like, I would have used it's called a Pax Arms rifle.
Oh, okay.
And it has you use like a blank shell and it fires a dart out, and I had tether line attached to that, so it's you can use either a crossbow or Pax Arms. There's kind of for and against which way you want to go, but both of them depends on the size of the cutting tip, how much you take.
It's very superficial, like it's only a tiny little sample and the skin of an orca anyway kind of slashes off. They kind of shed all the time, don't they, Róisín?
don't know if they shed all the time, to be honest. I
Yeah.
know, like they can say like the temperature as well. So like you're more likely going to have an animal shedding in a warmer,
Oh yeah, okay.
warmer water than in colder waters. So
Yeah, because that bit of information I was
if
gotten
you could get away with not having to biopsy, you would.
Yeah.
That's why we tried. That's why we went down the median route. But like yeah, yeah, they don't. I don't like. You wouldn't really see it coming off them in the water, but I'm sure they do shed.
Yeah. Oh, well, they use like shallow places around the world. Again, that piece of information I got collaborating with what you said is the shedding that I seen was in New Zealand populations, and like I can't think of her name. I know she's very famous and so on, but she's also cataloging orca in New Zealand, and like there was a video of there, and they said, so one of the research assistants said that the skin of the orca continuously sheds, and they also use like reefs and pebble beaches to actually
scratch it off. Yeah. And I know that and some groups in Antarctica move up to warmer waters to shed as well, because they get a lot of the diatoms growing in their skin and stuff like that. So
yeah, oh yeah. Okay.
but I'm sure they definitely are shedding all the time. Yeah, but
yeah, it's not an easy practice to get samples of them, obviously. So,
no,
so,
definitely not.
Yeah, I think
it depends. I mean, it depends on your conditions. I mean, on the survey, that the Celtic Voyager survey that we did put a rib on the back, but like that on the day we had them, it was just too choppy and there was a big swell. So
yeah.
like
Irish waters
depends on where you're, depends
yeah.
on where you see, because we don't, we have certainly got killer whales that are coming through every year, like the West Coast community. Fortunately, we think there's only 2 of them left.
Oh.
But they were, they're moving kind of between the Hebrides and down our western seaboard, but they've been seen off our east coast as well, and certainly off Wales.
So they
outside
don't,
of them.
Sorry, Róisín, they don't. Those two, those pair, they don't actually interact with or join any other pods or anything like that. They're just on their own.
I think one of them has been. There was one sighting of one of them in the same area as other killer whales. I think it was on the east coast of Scotland, but I don't know if it was kind of by chance. I don't think he was traveling with them. I think they were both there for the same reason, seals. But
yeah,
well, possibly seals. It's kind of hard to know, but they're that I did some of my work was I don't know if you know, but there was one of the animals that was belonged to that group was called Lulu. So
heard Lulu.
they were originally described, I think, in around 1992, and there were 10 of them. And the Hebridean Whale and Dolphin Trust built up a catalogue of them. And in all of the years that they've been photographed and sightings have been sent in, they've never ever been seen with a calf. And unfortunately, Lulu got caught in a creel rope pot and washed up in Tiree, the Hebrides Islands. But her PCB levels were off the charts. I think they were 10 times higher than the safety threshold.
Incredibly sad.
And so that would kind of explain why they possibly aren't reproducing. But also when they looked at, so Dr. Andy Foote, who I work closely with, he would have supervised 2 of my chapters. They looked at her gene, very highly inbred. So it's quite likely that these 2 animals, because they haven't seen any of the rest of them, but since since 2016. They haven't seen any of the rest of them, just these two and my husband. It's quite likely they could be 60 years old. Their PCB levels are very, very high. I don't know, they seem to be still navigating and still feeding, even though their PCB levels must be very high. But outside of those animals, we don't have any other kind of resident group of killer whales that are in our shores. And there's been quite a few sightings offshore, like the Irish waters are huge. Our EEZ is like, it's massive. And there's definitely been a lot of killer whale sightings, especially around the continental shelf. So there could be another population or a group that's around our shelf edge, because it's so highly productive. But logistically, to be able to study them would be very difficult. And so that's why there's kind of not much killer whale research being done in Ireland, because we don't have a resident population here.
Any more part of the two of them, procreators.
Yeah, and we're part of their range, like so they like most of their sightings would be around the Hebrides. But yeah, they're seen every summer as far as I know.
Do you know I came across you, Róisín, from that that article about the Swedish orca that came in. Is there any more information about that orca that has not been published?
I don't think so. I think the Norwegian Orca Survey put up a post that, from what I gathered, the necropsy revealed that that animal probably died of old age.
Yeah.
Its teeth were worn down to the gum, but I don't think its parasitic load or anything was concerning. So I think they put it down to old age. But yeah, the teeth worn down to the gum is quite common with the individuals that I'm studying. So they suck the mackerel in, and that suction over time wears down the teeth.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, if its teeth worn to the gum, maybe it's an indication of how old he is, but it also means that it's very difficult to age an animal because of the tooth. So I'm not sure if any of those teeth were long enough for them to be able to age it. But certainly when I photographed it in 2016, it was an adult. So they mature at 15. So that was 7 years ago. So it's at least in his 20s, but quite possibly a lot older.
I was wondering actually about that, because the identification, you were able to identify the orca. Did you do that by just going through every single image that you had, or did you have some kind of software?
Luckily for me, he was right at the start of my catalog.
No way.
So yeah, I mean, I have thousands of images, and like every time we see animals, we could come away with 700-800 photographs easily, and then basically would go through a process where every single image of that individual is placed in a folder, and then the best image of that then is what's used in the catalog. So in my catalog, he was number 22, and I was like, no way. I just thought, really? And I was like, no, I don't believe it. So I went and I think I'm up to like 150 or something. So no, it's definitely him. And that individual was actually swimming for 1 or 2 days before he was found. So there's a couple of very good wildlife photographers in Sweden that managed to get on a boat and get some really good images of him, because usually when an animal washes up, unless you get an image pretty much straight away, if it's rubbing off stone sand, that'll it'll ruin the markings, and there wasn't a lot of markings on that. He wasn't heavily marked on the saddle, and so I photographed him in 2016, but kind of at a funny angle. And then when I was out the following winter, Luckily for me, another vessel I had been in touch with were close by where we were fishing. And he had one of his crew members, John Roberts, is a very good photographer, but I think he might have had a better camera than me. So he took some fantastic images for me and sent them on. And so he had a really good image of that animal. So that was the one that really kind of nailed it down that it was him. So yeah, like it's sad, like, an animal passed away, but you know, on the upside is that we might have an idea now of the geographical range, that maybe these animals are not just going to Norway, they're heading towards Sweden. But anyway, well, kind of in the process at the moment, it's just kind of speculation, because an animal could go in there if it was unwell, or there could be any number of reasons, but so at the moment it's just building up contacts in Sweden and trying to get more and more images to try and see if we can get more matches that would really kind of prove, okay, that's where they might be going. So it's just kind of speculation for now, yeah. But it's the fun part of research, is kind of uncovering all this knowledge, and it's really important that we have all this baseline knowledge, because if anything happens in the future, like the more knowledge we have, the more we can conserve it. We can go to government bodies and say, hey, there's a group of killer whales up there, and if we don't have, with all we have is opportunistic sightings, we can't do much with that. Like, knowledge is power. So it's important that we build them up, and the fact that there are calves and youngs, and it certainly looks like it's a viable group. It's even more important that we conserve them, especially if they're doing well, because it seems that killer whale populations around the world are threatened, for various reasons. That's why this kind of research is very important,
So if there's any billionaires watching this video, please.
Yeah, call me.
Get in touch with Róisín.
Yeah.
Needs to be done.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It certainly, it was fantastic seeing an Irish researcher looking into a killer whale. I was delighted. I was, what? Oh my God. Because you don't see it. Like, I reserved myself to never see them in Ireland, because they're so rare.
Yeah, it's very unpredictable. Yeah.
I did hear that they come up to Donegal, and they come quite into shore, close into the coast. That again came from a third party, so I was like, what? I didn't hear that before. So
there certainly is a good few sightings off Donegal, it seems, but I don't know. Again, it's a gamble.
You just don't know how
frequent you get it. Like, yeah.
We don't have a kind of environment like in New Zealand where they come right in to catch some stingrays and so on. I don't know if you've seen the other interview I had with Nathan Pettigrew. But God,
no, I haven't actually. I must have a look.
He's a citizen scientist over New Zealand, and he was talking about the orca coming into the cove and so on, that where he's from, and their main food source is stingrays, so they'll come in straight into the shore and harbors, and like you can literally be standing a couple of feet away from these orcas.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I think they turn the rays upside down
yeah, they do. You have to put them into toxic paralysis.
Yeah.
So it's like they're incredibly intelligent, as you know, like.
And certainly in Shetland and Orca, there's loads of images of them right off the rocks there, and they're coming in there looking for seal pups and stuff, and they loads of, like, a lot of people photographing them. They come right in the spot. So if you were looking for somewhere close, I think to be kind of well, I suppose you're never guaranteed, but to have your highest chance of seeing them somewhere that's closer to Ireland would probably be Shetland. I think would be
And like there's some English people in the group, and they'd be asking where do we want to go somewhere to see orca. And for them in the southern parts of England, not going just looking at England in itself, they say that it takes about 6 hours journey from the places like London to get to Shetland, the Shetland Islands. And so it's a big journey. It's easier for Irish people to get over to Shetland.
Yeah, it's not that cheap to fly either from Scotland to Shetland. Maybe there's probably a ferry running.
There has to be, yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, but it would be an adventure anyway, for sure, and it'd be nice to go up there and have a look.
Beautiful place.
Yeah,
beautiful part of the world.
So when is your study coming up to completion, Róisín?
So I'm hoping this winter, October, I will complete the thesis, and then hopefully the publications will follow not too shortly afterwards. So probably next year, after. Takes a while to get it into public scientific literature, but I have a Killer Whale research page, Killer Whale Research Ireland. So anything that gets published will be put up on there and spread. I went quiet there for a few years. We started a family, so there wasn't really a whole pile of posts going up there. But yeah, so very much back on the research saddle now again. So
has to be done. We're looking out for some billionaires to invest in the Irish, and be nice. And if you know any, if you're going out again on boats and you have a little corner available, I'll gladly jump in the corner and just observe.
I'll call
you. But yeah, it was fantastic talking to you. I'm delighted that there's someone in Ireland that's doing some proper research into the area of orca, and I'm going to be continuing to look at your career going forward, and hopefully more resources will become available to you, and yeah, it's just exciting stuff for me anyway. Thanks very much for what you're doing.
Very much
congratulations.
Cheers. Thank you. It's lovely talking to you.